Kyrgyzstan is trapped by mountains, yet courted by powerful neighbors. It has no sea, a small domestic market, and fewer people than many global cities. Yet its valleys once carried Silk Road armies and poets. Its workers support families from Russia, its gold supports the state, and its glaciers feed rivers used far beyond its borders. It may even preserve the birthplace of Li Bai, and a disputed legend connecting the Kyrgyz to a Han dynasty general. Its politics have also overthrown presidents more than once. How does one of the world's most mountainous countries remain economically and strategically relevant? Start with the map. Kyrgyzstan lies in eastern Central Asia, between Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and China. The Tian Shan dominates the landscape, while the Pamir Alai system shapes the south. Most people live in a few valleys, especially around Bishkek in the Chui Valley and Osh near the Fergana Basin. The mountains do not merely surround the country. They determine where people live, where roads can be built, and what the economy can produce. A highway that looks short on a map may have to cross a pass above 3,000 meters. Winter snow can isolate communities. Landslides and avalanches can close routes. Moving goods between northern and southern Kyrgyzstan is expensive, while reaching a seaport requires crossing several borders. But the same mountains create the country's most valuable assets. High pasture supports sheep, cattle, and horses. Rivers provide hydropower. Glaciers store water. Alpine landscapes attract visitors. Geography isolates Kyrgyzstan, but it also gives the country resources that its lowland neighbors need. The country's most famous historical claim is also one of its most disputed. A widely accepted theory places the birth of Li Bai, the great Tang dynasty poet also known as Li Pu, in the ancient city of Suyab around the year 701. Suyab is commonly identified with the Kyrgyzstan archaeological site near modern Tokmak in northern Kyrgyzstan. The site itself is real. UNESCO identifies Kyrgyzstan as the city of Suyab, an important center on the northern Silk Roads. Chinese, Sogdian, Turkic, Indian, Persian, and other influences met in the Chui Valley. But saying Li Bai was born in Kyrgyzstan can be misleading. The modern country did not exist, and the poet's birthplace is not accepted without debate by every scholar. A careful version is this. One leading historical tradition places Li Bai's birth near present-day Tokmak. That alone reveals something important. Kyrgyzstan was never simply an isolated mountain zone. Its valleys connected China, the steppe, Persia, and the cities of Central Asia. The second historical claim is even more dramatic. Are the Kyrgyz descendants of Li Ling, the Han dynasty general who surrendered to the Xiongnu after defeat in the 2nd century BCE? Chinese records say that rulers of the Yenisei Kyrgyz later claimed a connection to Li Ling. During the Tang period, that story may have strengthened diplomatic ties with the Tang imperial house, which also used the surname Li. But a royal ancestry claim is not genetic proof. Modern Kyrgyz identity formed over centuries from multiple Turkic-speaking, steppe, and Central Asian populations. The Li Ling story matters as political memory and historical legend, not as proof that all Kyrgyz people descend from one Chinese general. The same mixture of history and legend appears in the number 40. Popular tradition links the word Kyrgyz with 40 tribes. The sun on the national flag has 40 rays, usually explained as the unity of those tribes. The central pattern represents the tunduk, the wooden crown at the top of a yurt. The Epic of Manas gives this symbolism emotional power. Performed orally by storytellers called Manaski, the epic tells of war, alliance, family, migration, and the defense of a homeland. It is less a reliable record of one historical period than a vast library of national memory. Modern Kyrgyzstan is also more diverse than its national symbols suggest. Ethnic Kyrgyz form the majority, but Uzbeks are a major community in the south, while Russians, Dungans, Uyghurs, Tajiks, Kazakhs, and others add to the social mix. Kyrgyz is the state language, and Russian retains official status. Most citizens identify with Sunni Islam, yet religious practice ranges from observant to secular. while Orthodox Christianity remains important among many Slavic families. This diversity links the country to several cultural worlds, but has also made language policy, education, and regional identity politically sensitive. Nomadic identity remains important, but it should not be frozen into a tourist image. Most Kyrgyz citizens are not full-time nomads. Yurts, horse culture, summer pastures, eagle hunting, fermented mare's milk, and kokboru survive through seasonal herding, sport, family tradition, festivals, and tourism. The society changed most dramatically under Russian and Soviet rule. During the 19th century, the Russian Empire absorbed much of the territory that is now Kyrgyzstan. Russian settlement, new administration, and competition over land disrupted older patterns of migration and grazing. In 1916, resistance to imperial wartime labor policies and wider colonial pressures led to a brutal uprising and repression. Many Kyrgyz fled across the mountains into China. The tragedy is remembered as Irkin and remains one of the deepest wounds in national history. After the Russian Revolution, Soviet power transformed the region again. The Kyrgyz Republic became a Soviet Union republic in 1936. The state expanded literacy, healthcare, roads, schools, cities, and industry. Bishkek, then called Frunze, became a planned Soviet capital. But modernization came with collectivization, forced settlement, political repression, and control over religion and public memory. Russian became the language of administration and interethnic communication. Kyrgyz remained central to identity, especially in rural life and oral culture. Soviet rule did not erase the nomadic past. It changed the conditions under which that past survived. Independence arrived in 1991, but economic security did not. Soviet supply chains collapsed, factories lost markets, and public institutions lost funding. A small mountain republic suddenly had to build its own currency, borders, army, tax system, and foreign policy. Kyrgyzstan developed more open political competition than several neighboring states, but it also became less stable. Presidents were overthrown during upheavals in 2005 and 2010. Election disputes triggered another political crisis in 2020. A constitution adopted in 2021 strengthened the presidency and reduced the role of parliament. Supporters argued that stronger leadership could produce order and faster decisions. Critics warned about pressure on independent media, civil society, and political opponents. Kyrgyzstan has often been more politically contested than its neighbors and more politically unpredictable. Its economy reflects the same mixture of resilience and vulnerability. The country has grown rapidly in recent years, helped by construction, consumer spending, trade, and regional re-export activity. But the economic base remains narrow. Services and commerce dominate urban activity. Agriculture and livestock remain essential in rural areas. Small manufacturing exists, but the country imports many finished goods, fuels, and machines. Gold is the most visible export. The Kamtor mine, located high in the Tian Shan, has long been one of the country's most important sources of foreign currency and public revenue. After years of conflict with its Canadian operator, the mine was transferred to Kyrgyz state ownership in 2022. For a small economy that made Kamtor both a national prize and a national risk. Strong gold prices can support exports and government income. Operational problems, falling output, or environmental damage can quickly affect the wider economy. The mine also sits near glaciers and sensitive mountain ecosystems. Arguments over tailings, waste, ice, and water show how difficult it is to separate economic survival from environmental protection. Yet the country's most important export may not be gold. It may be labor. Hundreds of thousands of Kyrgyz citizens work abroad, especially in Russia. Their remittances help families pay for food, homes, education, healthcare, and small businesses. In recent years, those transfers have still equaled a large share of the national economy. Migration reduces poverty at home, but it also exports part of the workforce. A downturn in Russia, a fall in the ruble, tighter migration rules or political shocks can reach villages in Kyrgyzstan almost immediately. This dependence explains why Russia remains so influential. Russian is still widely used. The labor market, media space, security relationships, and membership in the Eurasian Economic Union connect Kyrgyzstan closely to Moscow. China's role is different but growing. China is a major source of imports, credit, infrastructure, and trade. The long-discussed China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan Railway finally moved into construction after a launch ceremony in late 2024. If completed, the route could give Kyrgyzstan a new east-west corridor connecting western China with the Fergana Valley and markets farther west. It could reduce isolation and create transit business. But tunnels, high passes, debt, construction costs, and the change between Chinese and former Soviet rail gauges make it an enormous engineering challenge. Kyrgyzstan is not simply choosing between Russia and China. It also works with Turkey, the European Union, the United States, and its Central Asian neighbors. Its diplomacy is a search for room to maneuver. Regional cooperation has become especially important in the south. Soviet-era borders left enclaves, divided roads, shared canals, and disputed access to land and water. Clashes between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan in 2021 and 2022 killed civilians and displaced communities. In 2025, the two governments signed a border treaty and agreed to reopen transport links. That did not erase local grievances, but it reduced one of the region's most dangerous disputes. In Central Asia, geography is not only mountains and rivers. It is access to roads, pasture, irrigation, and markets. Water may become the country's most strategic asset. Around 9/10 of Kyrgyzstan's electricity is generated from hydropower in a normal year. Much of it depends on the Narin River system and large reservoirs such as Tokhtagul. Mountain runoff also feeds rivers used by downstream agriculture in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. This creates a seasonal conflict. Kyrgyzstan needs electricity most during cold winters. Downstream farmers need water most during the summer irrigation season. Reservoirs must serve both energy and agriculture across national borders. Climate change makes that bargain harder. Kyrgyzstan has already lost part of its glacier area, and national projections warn that the remaining area could shrink sharply by mid-century. Faster melting may initially increase some river flows, but long-term ice loss threatens more irregular water supplies, hydropower, agriculture, and communities exposed to floods and glacial-like disasters. Kyrgyzstan may lack oil, but it controls something Central Asia cannot live without: mountain water. Issyk-Kul shows both the opportunity and the risk. The enormous high-altitude lake lies between snow-covered ranges and usually remains ice-free because of its depth and mild salinity. It shapes the regional climate and supports the country's most important tourism economy. But tourism concentrates visitors along limited sections of the shore. Wastewater, construction, traffic, and weak sanitation can damage the lake that the industry depends upon. Bishkek faces a different environmental problem. The capital sits beneath mountains in the Chui Valley and still carries the wide avenues and apartment blocks of Soviet planning. It has grown through internal migration and private construction, becoming the center of government, universities, finance, and services. In winter, coal heating, traffic, old vehicles, and temperature inversions can trap severe air pollution over the city. The capital offers more opportunity than many regions, but also shows the limits of infrastructure under rapid urban growth. Public services tell a similar story. Kyrgyzstan has state-supported healthcare and public education, but neither is simply free at the point of use. Families may still pay for medicines, tests, tutoring, transport, or informal costs. Rural areas face shortages of doctors, teachers, equipment, and well-maintained buildings. The central challenge is not that Kyrgyzstan has no assets. It has water, gold, a young population, a strategic location, cultural depth, and dramatic landscapes. The challenge is converting those assets into stable opportunity at home. Gold cannot carry the economy forever. Remittances cannot replace domestic employment. A railway cannot transform trade without good roads, customs, and institutions. Hydropower cannot remain reliable if glaciers and infrastructure weaken. Political energy cannot create prosperity unless it becomes predictable government. Kyrgyzstan has survived not by overcoming geography, but by repeatedly adapting to it. The mountains protected communities, divided regions, generated water, preserved identity, and raised the cost of almost everything. Now the country must decide whether those mountains will remain a barrier or become the foundation for energy, transport, tourism, and regional cooperation. Is Kyrgyzstan's geography its greatest weakness or its greatest long-term advantage? If you enjoy seeing countries beyond the stereotypes, subscribe to Geologic.